Moving just 1 in 100,000 ions across the membrane is sufficient to create a negative 80 millivolt membrane potential. The derivation of this number is outside of the scope of this course, but for those of you with a physics background, we get it from the equation for the relationship between charge and voltage in a capacitor. What does 1 in 100,000 ions actually look like? Let's take a look. This is what 1 in 500 ions looks like. You can zoom out and change the number of particles we're looking at in any given field of view. Great. That's our original ion in the middle, surrounded by a sea of particles. In biology, we're constantly confronted with very small and very large numbers like this, so it's helpful every now and then to take a step back and try to conceptualize what these numbers mean. In real cells and neurons, there are trillions of ions inside the cell. So even just moving 1 in 100,000 ions still means that we're moving millions of ions outside in order to create this equilibrium. The key thing to understand is that the electrostatic force for moving just a tiny fraction of charged particles to the other side of the membrane is enough to balance out the diffusion of a large number of particles. This gives you a sense of how much stronger the electrostatic force is compared to diffusion. Moreover, this means that even though ions do move across the membrane to generate the membrane potentials, so few ions need to move that the concentrations inside and outside are effectively unchanged. Only a tiny proportion of ions move relative to the total number of ions inside and outside the cell. We can thus basically ignore the ions that move across the membrane when we talk about the intracellular and extracellular concentrations. Okay, so now we've established that there are positive potassium ions that leave the cell. Let's do a quick thought experiment. What if we magically added some additional negative ions to the outside of the cell to balance out those extra positive charges that came through the membrane? What would happen?